You are listening to We Are the Compassionate Revolution. I'm your podcast host, therapist, author, boundaries guide, Molly Moon. If you are a compassionate person and you want to know your worth, set better boundaries, live from your truth, and operate in your fullness, then I am so glad you've joined us. You ready? Let's get started. If you have been feeling like the world is on fire, like everywhere you turn, another system you thought you could trust is now crumbling, you're not alone. And if you're anything like me, your compassionate heart wants to help, but the constant chaos, fear, and conflict can leave you feeling powerless. Now, here's the thing. We are not powerless. But the way we respond to problems and approach solutions matters way more than we've been taught to believe. Today, I want to share a macro boundaries perspective on things that really shapes not just how I understand things, but also how I approach solutions. We're talking about nonviolence today, not as a passive do-nothing stance, but as a powerful boundary. A boundary that can transform the way we solve problems and create change. Because if we keep using the same tools that created the problem, we're going to keep getting the same results. And I think we're ready for something different. Nonviolence as a boundary is the primary focus of this episode, but let me take a quick moment to set the stage. So we look at everything that's happening in our world today, and it just keeps going, right? Locally, nationally, globally. And many of us, as I talked about in the last podcast episode, which is worth a listen if you're new here, many of us are getting really overwhelmed with all the things that are breaking. All the houses of cards are falling down. All the systems we used to trust in are crumbling. Now, some of us, to be sure, trusted in those systems more than others. Some folks never had the privilege of the beneficial side of those systems because they were never invited into the system's good graces from the get-go. Think, for example, about African people enslaved, brought over to the Americas. The system in America wasn't there to help them. It was there to exploit them. And it didn't stop exploiting them just because slavery ended. Instead, a whole bunch of other things were devised to continue to try to keep an entire people group as disempowered as possible because the dysfunctional system depended on that. We've got systems that run on racism still to this day. So depending on your background, your context, some people have been aware of the unjust house of cards nature of many of our systems for a very long time, and they've had to find some way to live within that, knowing full well what it was. Others are midway in their awakening journey, and still others are just now waking up, just now asking questions. Everybody wakes up at a different pace, in a different way, based on their context. And that makes sense. And we can welcome them all. Because waking up at all is a beautiful thing. It's a hard thing. But nothing can change for all of us until we wake up as a collective. So welcome to all. It's never too late. And there are more and more people joining us because it's hard not to wake up right now. It's hard not to wake up because we're experiencing a big mess in multiple areas of life all at once. We are experiencing a collective toppling of systems. Systems we thought we could trust are showing us they cannot be trusted. And it's easy to get caught up in fear, in worry, in the endless mental loop of, oh my gosh, everything's going wrong. And yet, for those of us who are not in immediate harm's way, I want to encourage you. Number one, if we let ourselves get totally bound up in fear, we cannot help those who need us right now. And number two, if we let ourselves get totally bound up in fear, we also can't learn and grow from what is happening. So we got to remember to pause, to take a deep breath, to pull back and see the bigger picture. We have to remember the long arc of history, who we are, the truth about who we are. And when we do that, we put ourselves in a position to help create real change. So let me first give you a metaphor that helps me so much. And it's a simple metaphor. You've probably heard it before. Life is a classroom. I love seeing life as a series of classrooms. There are lessons to be learned in each one, each experience, and we get to graduate from a classroom once we learn a particular lesson. I mean, a metaphor can only go so far, but this metaphor is really applicable to a lot of things, and seeing life in this way puts me in a position of empowerment instead of disempowerment in many ways. Yes, there are things happening over which I have no control. Yes, I have hated some of the classrooms I've been in. They were hard. They really hurt. But if I look at everything going on as part of a classroom I am in, I suddenly become focused on my responsibility to learn and grow instead of on how hopeless or powerless I might feel, which is nice because it helps me move from 100% victim to an empowered learner, even if I am also a victim in the situation. I'm at least asking myself, okay, what can I learn about love through this? And if my responsibility is primarily to learn and grow and to gain wisdom so that I can better embody love, then something shifts inside of me. And physically even, my breathing gets a little deeper, my muscles loosen a bit, my mind feels less constricted, critical thinking improves, my awareness expands, my perception increases. And I'm not just talking about intellectually, I'm talking about heart-centered learning. The classroom of life is for our hearts. The intellect is actually last. We let our heart lead and our head will follow. That's how it's supposed to work. And what is the heart concerned with? The heart is concerned with the truth about who we are. The heart is concerned with how we show up for our lives, how we do or do not embody love. What does love look like here? The heart is concerned with how we can learn to step out of fear and old conditioning and better align with our truth. Oof, opening up the heart. This is where the real lessons occur if there are lessons to be learned. Because otherwise we're just stuck and trapped in ongoing cycles of dysfunction and despair. So let's look at this issue of violence or nonviolence from the heart and see what we can learn. Let's look at our world from the heart and see what we can learn. Because why does violence keep repeating for the humans? Why are humans trapped in this endless cycle of violence? And I'm speaking of humans as a collective here. We, as a collective mass, keep repeating the same lessons over and over and over again. As a collective, we can't seem to graduate from this classroom. Well, one of the major premises of the world we live in, of what is called dominant culture, is that violence is the solution. The principle of might makes right, of survival of the fittest, of the idea that, quote, quote, all is fair in love and war. Violence. This is where colonialism comes from. This is where genocide comes from. This is where classism comes from. This is where racism comes from. All sorts of isms come from this. That the solution to a problem is violence. That force is required. Not just physical violence, relational violence, emotional violence, verbal violence, psychological violence. That power over is the only way. Take or be taken. Dishonoring someone else in order to get something for yourself, which can be done with words or laws or brainwashing just as easily as it can be done with a fist, that's how you get what you want. In order for someone to get what they want, someone else has to lose. That's the premise. Now get this, in our heart of hearts, we long for peace. Humans long for harmony. But what do we keep getting? Again, speaking of us as a collective, let me ask a question, and this is related. You'll see where I'm going in just a minute. If I keep growing sunflowers in a field But I say with my mouth, I don't want sunflowers there anymore, but I keep planting more sunflower seeds with my actions in the soil of the field. What am I going to get come harvest time? And also, every sunflower that grows from just one seed, every seed that comes to harvest produces 1,000 to 2,000 sunflower seeds. Ugh. So, I don't just get one sunflower seed from one sunflower seed. A seed reaps a harvest that is exponential. Let's use that analogy when it comes to violence. If we, as humans, keep planting seeds of violence, but we claim with our mouth that we don't want violence anymore, but we keep planting seeds of violence with our actions, what are we going to get? We're going to get violence. We're going to get a lot of violence. We're going to get a harvest, an exponential amount of violence. Humans have a long and messy history of trying to solve problems using the very same things that cause the problems. And from a short-term perspective, it seems to work. If a violent person is no longer capable of causing harm because we used bigger violence to take them out, then in that narrow moment, the problem looks solved. Say Joe is mad at me, so he bops me on the head, and that hurts me, so I bop him on the head even harder to make him stop. Okay, from a short-term perspective, violence works. Violence solves the problem of violence. Because Joe has a concussion now, so he's laying down, which means he can't bop me on the head back. But what happens when Joe heals up from his concussion? Well, I'd better watch my back, because Joe's probably coming for me. I can't relax. In fact, I'd better build some walls to keep Joe out. And maybe think about getting some weapons, because if Joe's going to come at me with a stick, I better find myself a club. Ha, yeah, come at me, Joe. Try me now. Actually, now that I think about it, maybe I better get Joe now while he's down with a concussion so that he doesn't come get me once he can finally walk again. That was smart. Now Joe's gone. But now Joe's friends are mad at me. Now Joe's kids are mad at me, so I better get my friends to help me stay safe from his friends, and I better get my kids to watch out for his kids. Do you see how the seed comes up and produces more seeds of the same? And also, who else was watching that whole exchange and learning from it? The rest of the village was watching. Who is learning from my actions and planning to do the same when they grow up? The children are. Now, as they grow, they're making plans to build even better walls or come up with even better weapons, and justifying all those acts of violence as simply doing what you got to do, because violence is the problem and violence is the solution. And that's just how it is. And I'm too busy trying to survive in this violent world to ever stop and think about how I'm literally helping to create the very problem that's killing us. And by the way, I never hit a Joe on the head and gave him a concussion, okay? This was just a story. But over time, violence got woven into the invisible code of how we humans do humanity. How we solve problems, how we relate, what we expect from each other, even what we write into our laws and our norms. Violence becomes so embedded, so normalized. We don't even see it. So we don't even know to ask the right questions to challenge it. We don't even know the questions to ask. Violence is just how it's done. Embedded into the layers of how we understand ourselves in the world. And it's easy to point the finger out there, but let's take just a minute to notice and appreciate how this works inside of our own selves. Think of the violence inside of your own head towards yourself. For example, how do you speak to yourself when you make a mistake? Notice that. Even our own thinking patterns are trained to see violence as a solution. We make a mistake, and immediately the thoughts jump in. Oh, goodness, how could I be so stupid? What is wrong with me? I can't believe I did that. Notice how violent that language is. It attacks. It goes for the core of who we are. And we do that to ourselves all the time. Because in dominant culture, we have been taught that violence is the way. Violence is the solution for the problem. If we're violent, it will make things better. It will make us perform better. So even for those of us who do not want to be violent, not towards others, not towards ourselves, it's right there in our own heads, in our own thought life. Without meaning to, we respond to problems with self-violence. We've been steeped in it. We have to see this problem with a lot of compassion here, because this is a problem we've inherited. We were born into it. Our parents were born into it. Their parents were born into it. And how did the humans fall for it? How did this become dominant culture? It's kind of easy if you think about it, because it works. Well, it seems to work in the short term. And we humans live such short little lives in the grand scheme of things. What is the Hebrew text? That humans are like the grass of the field, here for a moment, then gone, or something like that. If we could each live for 500 years from start to finish, that was our lifespan, we'd be able to see a lot more clearly the real cost of using violence to solve the problem of violence. Because planting seeds of violence does not end violence. It grows it. And that means the suffering becomes exponential. And if we could live for 500 years and understand then that we as a species are a collective, and what we do to each other, we do to ourselves, then we could see the effects. We'd see the effects of violence on our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and all the other humans who pay such a terrible price. And not just us, the whole earth. The whole earth pays the price. And maybe then we could see clearly enough to choose differently and teach differently. But we don't live 500 years. So instead, we have to learn from each other and from those who've gone before, from those who can see with a higher perspective. And this is where some spiritual principles can really speak volumes, especially if we consider them not just as individual precepts for just our little life, but principles for the humans as a whole over a period of lifetimes. The Hindu and Buddhist concept of karma comes in here really well. That we humans keep repeating a lesson until we finally learn it. The teachings of Jesus can be valuable here too, that what we sow, we reap, that you will know them by their fruit. Now that can be a valuable teaching in the short term for an individual, but consider stepping back and looking at that wisdom and applying it over the long term as a collective for the human species. Apply that over our systems. You will know them by their fruit. Oof. And this is where history also speaks volumes and can become such a powerful teacher to us once you begin studying real history. And those of you who do, you know what I'm talking about. You can't help but see it. A People's History of the United States, a book by Howard Zinn, for example, just as a starter. Oof. Or just the scientific principle of cause and effect. Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Consider that from a collective lens for the human species, and we get clarity. If we plant seeds of violence, we will harvest violence, not just individually, but collectively. And tragically, that means many of the people forced to reap the harvest aren't the ones who planted it. Think of the bomb dropped on Nagasaki. The people of Nagasaki didn't deserve that. They got stuck with the harvest of seeds of violence that were planted because we exist as a collective. So they got stuck with the fruit of the belief that violence can solve violence. And by the way, as an American child, guess what I was taught about that incident? That violence solves violence. That Nagasaki was sad, but also proof that violence can be and will be solved by engaging in bigger violence. That was the takeaway. That's the intellectualized version of that lesson that was taught to many, many American students. And yet, what did the photographs from Nagasaki communicate? Look at that famous photograph of that little girl running. Look at that photograph with your heart. See yourself in it. See your child in it. you will hear such a different message, and you'll hear it real quick. Because what does your heart say? Our heart says, this cannot be the way. No, 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 no. This is not the way forward. This is not a solution. This is not okay. But if we only listen to the head, if we only listen to those who are steeped in the programming that violence is the way, then we don't learn, and we don't grow, and we don't change. We stay stuck in that wheel of karma because the head is stuck with the dysfunctional programming it's been given. So if the head is taught that violence solves violence, then, well, the head is going to operate from the presupposition that violence solves violence. And our heads can always find justification for what we do. And because we have such short little lives and we're kept separated from our history as humans, then we only see things from a very short-term perspective in the immediate moment. Instead of understanding that violence begets violence, and that the seeds of violence may take a long time to come to harvest, but they will come to harvest, and that we individuals form a collective, and the collective will pay. But many of us have been so carefully trained to see only ourselves or our little group as the humans that matter, and that others who are outside of our group don't matter as much. And this keeps us from learning and growing. Until we see the human collective as us, we totally miss out on the collective classroom of which we are here to learn from. Because if we see ourselves as totally separate from the other, then the suffering of quote, quote, other people seems separate or apart. Their suffering is disconnected, having nothing to do with us. And then we don't learn. And then we don't change. And then we all remain stuck in the grinding wheel of karma, experiencing the same dysfunctional lessons over and over and over again. And violence harms the ones causing violence as well. The blunted empathy, the inability to see our place in the whole of humanity, the grandiosity, the contempt. If contempt is poison in a marriage, as researchers John and Julie Gottman say it is from their research, then what is contempt in a culture? When one culture sees another people group as beneath them, what does that do to that culture? Because everyone in the supposed superior culture is ingesting that poison. It's like when a family believes that trans people aren't real people, aren't right. What does that speak into the culture of that family, to the children growing up in that family? It speaks a message loud and clear, over and over again, with and without words, that you are not actually safe in this family. Nobody is. Because you're only okay if you measure up to this particular standard of which you will achieve by sheer luck. Because if you're unlucky and draw the trans card, which we know from science that somewhere around 0.5 to 1% of folks will, and this is not a new thing, transgender people have always existed in human groups. But if you draw that card, which you don't do by choice, you're not going to be seen as worthy of even existing. You are not going to be seen as worthy of even basic respect as a human being. What does that level of existential violence communicate to the children and other members of that family? Is that pro-life? No, not at all. And let's go ahead and apply that to the macro. What is communicated to humans when their government says it's not okay to be trans? What does that communicate to a culture? It communicates fear and dread. And the people who aren't trans may not notice it because they're not directly under threat yet, but they do receive the message indirectly that only some humans are okay and others are not. So make sure you do what you got to do to stay in the good graces of whoever is in power, because basic respect for your existence is not considered a right. You only get that if they like you. One of the biggest missing pieces for compassionate people as we heal and come into our power is boundaries, because we've been trained not to have any. And I've experienced that not only in my own life, but with tons of people I've worked with as a therapist, fellow counselors, physicians, teachers, social workers, people who care. We know we need boundaries, but how? And then if we try to have some, we feel selfish, guilty, or mean. That's why I have such a strong focus on boundaries, because boundaries are integral to our empowerment. But people like us need to discover our boundaries in a way that actually works for our compassionate hearts. And that's what my Boundaries Breakthrough mini course is all about. It's just $19, it's packed with value, and it's so easy to do. You can get the Boundaries Breakthrough mini course at boundaried.com. That's boundaried with a D.com. The link is in the show notes, and I hope you have a blast in the mini course because it was really fun to make for you. On a related note, I once knew a prominent family who discovered their son was gay, and they kicked him out of the house as a teenager. And they then proceeded to view all of his problems that he then had as the natural consequences of him being gay. They truly believed he was reaping the harvest of being in sin because they believed that being gay was a chosen sin, instead of realizing they just made their teenage son homeless and destitute, not to mention the psychological implications of what they did to him. They just committed relational violence against their son. So of course he's going to have some problems as a young person who just got totally rejected by his family on every single level, because who wouldn't? But the parents couldn't see that. They felt good and righteous for their actions. They truly believed it was all his fault, because their belief system had impaired their ability to see what they were doing. They couldn't learn from that classroom. They were in a classroom, but they couldn't learn from it, because their belief system impaired their ability to see that their son was not the aggressor here. They were. They were committing violence against their own child. First of all, what horrible wounding exists already in their own hearts to be able to do that to their baby, right? And what horrible wounding was caused to them when they did it? And what were the other kids in the family learning from all that? Well, they were learning that they themselves do not have inherent belonging. They only have earned belonging in their family. They do not have inherent safety. They have conditional safety. Because if they in their body and their being do not measure up to the requirements of those in authority, they will be removed too. So if they have something about them, inherent to them, that is deemed faulty, they better hide it, suppress it, or cut it out of themselves. They must do violence to themselves, or violence will be done to them. And how much violence is done by ourselves to ourselves in order to fit in? Think about this on a societal level, in order to be deemed acceptable or worthy. And we'll even celebrate it. We'll celebrate it in each other. It's so normalized, we don't even see it. We twist ourselves into knots in order to be seen as good enough. Some of us abandon ourselves in order to chase after money or status, whatever it is, so that we'll be seen as good enough. Some of us hate our bodies or treat our bodies with harshness in order to try to get our body to be the size it's supposed to be in order to be acceptable. And we're so afraid to be kind to ourselves because we've been systematically taught that kindness will lead to laziness. Kindness will lead to what? A lack of effort? That's what we think. Because harshness, judgment, contempt, criticism, isn't that how you get results? We become relationally violent to our own selves. So from the micro to the macro, we can see this principle operating everywhere we look. And even if we don't like it, here's a trap that gets us stuck in it anyways. We think, just one more time, just one last time. We're conditioned to believe that about violence. If I'm just violent this one last time, that will solve the problem. But that doesn't work. It's a lot like siblings in the backseat of a car having a fight over elbow room. You know, the parents like, stop fighting. And the kids say, he hit me first. Well, she hit me last. And on a larger scale, we adults do this all the time. Same thing. We think, well, I'll do something besides violence as soon as it's all fair. And by fair, I mean I get the last word. Or the violence will end as soon as we do this one last thing. But that means the violence never stops if we're waiting for it to be fair, because it won't ever be fair. Honestly, That's the truth of it. The violence will only stop if it stops, which means somebody's going to get the last word, or the last blow, or the last bomb, which really truly sucks. But we all lose the longer it keeps going. We are all losing when violence is our solution. So stepping out of violence means we accept that sometimes things are going to be unfair in the short term, and that we accept that. Because we hold the line that love is the way, even if we don't quite know what that looks like yet. And we don't know what that looks like because we're so accustomed to violence as the solution. But we can't ever learn a new way until we refuse to keep participating in the old way. The old way is blocking the way of the new way. Being a human in dominant culture is hard. We are arriving in this world already carrying in programming from centuries of might makes right, and violence solves violence. Fear-based conditioning is woven into our DNA, and we gotta see that. Helps us have compassion, because it's been packed into us with such a density to it that it makes it seem like it's straight up truth. We assume it's truth, and then we act accordingly. And by the way, when you are the recipient of direct violence, there is a survival instinct to respond back with violence if you can. There's no shame in that. It's 100% okay to want to survive. In fact, I do not presume to speak for those who are the direct recipients of violence right now. I'm not speaking about those who are currently trying to survive under direct attacks. That is not my place. My place is to speak for those who resonate, who are not in immediate harm's way, who are on this planet as compassionate people who have the room and the space to look at this, to consider this. We hold within us the seeds of what the world needs in order to change. And if we are to become the change the world needs, we have to shed the bullshit programming we've been given, because otherwise we ourselves will keep planting the seeds of violence and hate and fear that lead to more of the same. And we won't be planting the seeds the world needs. And we'll never reach critical mass if we keep waiting for someone else to do it. We reach critical mass by saying, I'm going to do it, even if no one else joins me. I'm going to refuse violence as an option. I'm going to figure out how to plant different seeds that I want to see come up in this world. And as I do that, and as you do that, we create a ripple effect. We disrupt the current pattern. And we have to do it whether no one else joins us or not. But guess what? We're stepping into a long line of people who've been planting seeds way before we were ever here. We ourselves are often the fruit of those who've gone before us. Because think of the people you've learned from and grown from on your healing journey. Those people who came before you, they planted seeds for you to receive. And now you are the next in line. You have seeds for you to plant. And you're not alone. More and more and more compassionate people are joining us. More join us every single day. And as the next person joins us and the next person after that joins us, we begin to create a movement. And that creates even more disruption, holy disruption. And that's how critical mass is achieved. Did you know, and this is research by Erica Chenoweth, who's a political scientist. Chenoweth's research found that nonviolent campaigns are twice as likely to achieve their directives as violent ones. Her estimate is that it takes only 3.5% of a population actively engaging in nonviolent protests in order to catalyze serious changes. And by the way, from what I heard, Chenoweth did not set out to find those results. She was actually fairly skeptical that nonviolent protests would have a greater impact than violent ones. It's kind of a cool story. But what really got me was 3.5%? 3.5%? Okay. 3.5% is what it takes to begin to create a tipping point? Oh, we can do that. We can do way more than that. So what do we do? Well, first we practice stepping back to see the bigger picture. being in the weeds has its place. Being in the weeds is where we can really feel empathy and compassion for those who are suffering. But if we only ever live there in the weeds, we lose perspective and our nervous system gets destroyed. That's why it's called getting lost in the weeds, because the immediate moment can really mess up our nervous systems, not just our perspective. So for those who can, not everybody can, but for those who can, who are not in immediate harm's way at the moment, we've got to practice habits to tend to our nervous systems. And that includes pulling out of the immediate moment for a wider perspective. You don't want to stay stuck in the weeds if you don't have to be. We have to rise up and also see the bigger picture. And that really helps us with our action taking. Because in the weeds, things can get very reactive. You've heard the saying, I'm sure, you can't see the forest for the trees. Same concept. We've got to get above it, not just in it. And I get the temptation to respond with violence. It's really easy to hate people who are being hateful. But a good question is, if I plant relational violence here, if I respond to hate with hate, what will that grow? Hate is easy. And our brains can always justify it. But what is it going to grow? Think in terms of seeds. We have to start asking, what is needed here? What seeds are needed here to create fundamental change? Ask your heart and see what answers you get. For example, maybe your heart says love. Okay. What could love look like here? Ask with curiosity. And you'll notice love is not passive. And it's often a lot harder than just going with the reactive flow. Hate is a lot easier. But love will produce the kind of action that can produce a different outcome over the long term. So we need both the ground level view from the weeds and the big picture view from overhead. Filter both through the heart. Ask the question, what is needed here? It's a beautiful question. What kind of world do I want to grow? We are creators. We are growing our world together. Knowing that helps us stand firm in resistance while modeling and planting the change we want to see in this world. How about instead of violence, we plant seeds of truth, seeds of justice, seeds of understanding, seeds of compassion, seeds of love. Now, you know, I didn't make this up. Nonviolent resistance has been taught powerfully and beautifully by many others far ahead of me. But if this concept happens to be newer to you and you want to go deeper with it, Thich Nhat Hanh is worth taking a look at. The teachings of Martin Luther King Jr., worth taking a look at. Gandhi, worth taking a look at if you haven't already, and so many more. And when you do, you will notice nonviolence is not passive. Nonviolence is not quiet. It's very active, very strong, very powerful. And it's not just a global principle, it's a personal one. Someday, I don't think we're going to use the term nonviolence. It's not actually a great name. Because as a name, nonviolence, right? It's talking about what it's not what it's for. But for now, because violence is woven into everything so deeply, nonviolence is actually a really good name, and especially from a boundaries perspective. Because it speaks to right where we are at as a species. Nonviolence. It means, well, I don't necessarily know what to do, but I do know what I'm not gonna do. Not violence. Violence is not an option for me, so looks like I'm gonna have to start figuring out some other options. Nonviolence, when we see it that way, is a boundary. Nonviolence, that's our boundary line. I love that. Because it allows us space for experimentation and learning and growth, and that is the stage we are in as humans. This is where it starts. Nonviolence helps us move out of the head, out of the programming, and into the heart. I don't know what to do yet, but I know what not to do, so okay, heart, I'm listening to you. What seeds would we like to try planting here? Again, this is in the micro just as much as it's in the macro. got marriage therapists like John and Julie Gottman, who I mentioned earlier, or Terry Real. They teach nonviolent relational practices in intimate partnerships. Turns out we can't grow a healthy relationship using things like contempt and control, despite what our world has tried to program into us, right? And the Gottman's research proves that beyond a shadow of a doubt. But again, this is not a passive approach because, for example, if the other person refuses to join us in learning and practicing healthier tools, pro-relational tools, well, that gives us our boundary too, because maybe it's time to say goodbye. Ending a relationship can be an act of nonviolence because boundaries help us walk in honor towards ourselves and others. That's why I do what I do with boundaries. Boundaries gives us a framework for how to operate in love without becoming a doormat, without participating in violence by allowing someone else's violence towards us to go on unchecked. I will not participate in something that's causing harm, and that harm includes to me. Someone who is committed to continuing an abusive behavior towards you is not entitled to ongoing access to you just because they demand that you give it to them. And we can find these practices in the personal therapy space as well. For example, one of my favorites, internal family systems, often called IFS, that teaches us how to practice nonviolence inside of our own heads. IFS shows us how to respond to the internal parts of us that are struggling with love. Parts of us that maybe only know harshness and judgment. That we can actually step into loving leadership over our own internal system and respond to our own neurons with acceptance and love. Because it is not our brain's fault that it was programmed to think that violence is the answer. And we can help it. And in so doing, and yes, it is hard work sometimes, those neurons transform and rewire in the presence of our love. What if the micro is the macro? What if those same inner boundaries that can change our brains, that can change our lives, that can change our homes, what if those same boundaries can also change our world? But we won't get to find out if we keep sowing seeds of violence, hoping for different results. We are being called to shed the conditioning and the lies that have kept us disempowered and trapped in dysfunctional cycles for generations upon generations. Our hearts know violence is not the answer. Our hearts know love is the way. And we are waking up. And when we listen deeply, sometimes really deeply because it can be hard to find, but when we listen deeply, we can even find love and compassion for those who are still asleep, maybe even for those who are still engaged in violence, because this is not an us versus them problem. It's a human problem. And some humans just haven't woken up yet. So what can we do about that? We can show them how. We change it together, or we don't change it at all. We become the change. We show them, and it starts right here. With me, with you, with us. Don't be fooled into thinking that your small part is actually small. Remember the sunflower. One seed, when brought to harvest, produces 1,000 to 2,000 sunflower seeds. Your one seed of love that you plant today is a big deal. You are a big deal, my friend. You are a creator. We all are. We are the compassionate revolution, and you matter. Your healing matters. And you are not alone. I'm right here with you. Until next time, remember, love is the way, and you deserve the same love you so easily give to everyone else. My compassionate friend, I am so glad you're with us. We are the compassionate revolution. We are the change the world needs, and we're becoming it. If you loved this episode, please share it with a friend or give this podcast a 5-star review. I'd appreciate it so much. And if you'd like to get practical and work with me more closely on boundaries, you can come visit me at boundaried.com. That's boundaried with a D.com for amazing resources, because this is how we do it. One action at a time. We are moving into our power, and I'm so proud to be in this movement with you.